Friends, we gather here today with a very simple but profoundly liberating truth before us. Fear has no existence of its own. Fear is not a power, not an entity, not a force capable of acting upon you. Fear is nothing more than a moment in which the mind accepts the suggestion that there is a power apart from God. That is all. And the moment we accept that suggestion, the moment we grant reality to anything other than the one presence, the one life, the one I, fear begins to whisper its message. But it whispers only to the part of us that believes itself separate from God. Fear has no voice at all in the consciousness that knows its oneness. Now, this is important. We are not here today to learn how to battle fear, nor to arm ourselves with stronger mental weapons, nor to develop a will capable of pushing fear away. No, that is the old way of living, the human way, the way of two powers, good and evil, God and something opposed to God. But if you have learned anything at all in our work together, it is that where there are two powers, there is always fear. And where there is one, fear cannot exist. Fear is nothing more than a shadow that appears when you turn away from the light of truth. And does a shadow ever respond to struggle? Does a shadow resist argument? Does a shadow grow weaker because you push at it with your hands? Certainly not. The shadow disappears for one reason only, because the light is recognized. And so it is with fear. Fear does not dissolve because you fight it. Fear dissolves because you return to the awareness of the presence that has never left you. And so I say to you, the whole purpose of our work today is to learn how to turn back simply, gently, quietly to that inner light, not by analysis, not by effort, but by the simplest act of recognition. Just 3 minutes of turning inward to acknowledge the I that is with you always, the I that is your life, your safety, your supply, your very being. If you can truly grasp this, if you can realize even for a moment that fear has no power except the power you give it by believing in a second presence, then you have already begun the journey out of fear and into truth. For the presence is always here. It has never departed. It awaits only your recognition, and the instant you turn to it, even in the faintest whisper of awareness, the shadow of fear begins to fade into its native nothingness. This, then, is our foundation. There is only one, and because there is only one, fear has no place in you. Let us hold that truth as we continue. Now, let us move a little deeper into this matter of fear, for fear never comes to us in an abstract form. It always comes clothed in appearance. It comes wearing the garments of the world, and unless we recognize what these garments are, we may be tempted to believe the appearance rather than the truth. Fear speaks to us through what I call the 4 temporal kingdoms, the 4 great illusions that have ruled human thought from the beginning of time. And they are as active today as they were in the days of Daniel. The kingdom of the body, the kingdom of supply, the kingdom of time, and the kingdom of world forces. These kingdoms seem so solid, so authoritative, so inevitable, that unless we are spiritually awake, we bow before them without even knowing we have done so. When the body feels an ache, when a diagnosis is given, when age begins to press upon us, fear whispers, "You are a physical organism subject to physical conditions." That is the kingdom of the body speaking. And when the bank account grows thin, when employment is uncertain, when the future seems insecure, fear whispers, "Your life depends upon material sources." That is the kingdom of supply. And how often we hear the kingdom of time. You haven't enough hours, enough years, enough chances. And lastly, the kingdom of world forces, governments, economies, institutions, circumstances that appear outside your control, all whispering, "Your fate lies in external hands." And yet, dear ones, every one of these messages is but a voice without substance, a shadow across the surface of consciousness. For the moment you give these kingdoms recognition as power, you step out of the one presence and into duality, and fear is born. But the moment you turn inward and remember the truth that all power is in the invisible, that all authority is in the one who lives as your very being, these kingdoms lose their voice. They have no more influence than a dream dissolving upon waking. Understand this. These kingdoms do not threaten you. They do not bind you. They do not stand between you and God. They are nothing more than forms of suggestion, trying to persuade you to believe in a self that is separate, vulnerable, and dependent upon circumstances. But you are not that self. You are not that body. You are not that bank account. You are not that date on the calendar. You are not that position within society. Fear speaks only to the false identity, the one that imagines itself apart from God. And the moment you shift your attention, even slightly, from these temporal kingdoms to the eternal, the moment you acknowledge the presence within, fear begins to fall away of its own nothingness. This is why our 3-minute practice is so powerful. It moves you out of the realm where these kingdoms seem to rule and into the awareness of the kingdom that is not of this world. And in that kingdom, there is no fear, because there is no second presence to oppose the one. Let us continue, then, with this deeper understanding, for in our next section, we will see clearly that fear cannot touch the one who knows the truth of his own identity. And now, having looked at the nature of fear and the voices through which it speaks, we come to the central point, the key without which nothing else can stand. Fear can speak only to the human sense of self, the little I, the one born of flesh, shaped by environment, limited by circumstance, and destined, so it believes, to rise and fall with the world around it. That I fears because it imagines itself alone. It hears the whispers of the temporal kingdoms and supposes they are speaking truth. But within you, within every one of us, there is another identity, an identity that does not tremble before appearances, an identity that the world cannot touch. This is the Christ of your own being, the I am that was before Abraham, the divine presence that lives its life as you, and that Christ identity knows nothing of fear, for it lives in the absolute certainty of oneness. Now listen to this carefully. The Christ in you is not a part of your consciousness. It is the very essence of your consciousness. It is not something you acquire. It is not a higher self you must ascend to. It is the only self you have ever had. The human sense of self is merely the shadow, the Christ is the reality. The human sense is the dream, the Christ is the waking. The human sense is the branch, Christ is the vine. And without that vine, the branch can do nothing. When you say I, you are speaking one of two different languages, depending upon where your attention is anchored. When the attention is fixed upon the body, upon the finances, upon time, upon the world, I means the limited self. And that self is always subject to fear, always reacting, always doubting, always defending. But when the attention turns inward, when for even a moment you remember the presence, I becomes something entirely different. It becomes the voice of God expressing itself as your own being. This is why the Master said, I can of mine own self do nothing. He was not speaking of a personal weakness. He was revealing the nature of the true identity. The Christ has no personal power to defend because it has no personal opponent to resist. It knows only one presence, one power, one life. And in that recognition, fear cannot enter. So hear me well. You cannot overcome fear as a human being, but fear cannot touch you as the Christ. The moment you shift identification, the moment you cease to believe that you are the anxious mind, the fragile body, the struggling personality, fear loses its footing entirely. And this shift, this turning from the false I to the true I am, does not require hours of work or long periods of meditation. One moment of recognition, one instant in which you acknowledge, I and the Father are one, breaks the spell. Fear dissolves in that very moment, not because you have defeated it, but because you are no longer the one who believed in it. This, beloved, is the purpose of our 3-minute practice. It is the invitation to step out of the illusory self and into the self that cannot fear. It is the doorway through which the Christ reveals itself, quietly, silently, inevitably. Let us hold this truth, for in our next section we will see why no amount of thinking or effort can bring us into this realization, only stillness. And now let us look at something that is vital to your spiritual freedom. Thought cannot bring you into truth. Thought cannot silence fear. Thought, by its very nature, moves upon the level where fear itself arises. When we try to think our way out of fear, we remain within the same mental domain that produced the fear in the first place. And so, thinking becomes a circle with no exit, an activity that exhausts but never liberates. The human mind believes that if it can only find the right affirmation, the right phrase, the right technique, it will finally conquer fear. But that is not the infinite way. That is not the message of the Christ. The fear is not dissolved by stronger thoughts. It is dissolved by the absence of thought, by the recognition that no thought has power at all. You see, fear is always connected to the belief that something needs to be achieved, solved, resisted, defended, or overcome. Fear is born the moment you imagine that your welfare depends upon the activity of your thinking. And so long as you trust your thoughts to save you, you will remain in bondage to them. But the Christ of your being is not reached through thought. It is reached in stillness, the stillness in which the mind yields, in which the personal self is silent, in which all human effort comes to rest. When the mind stops struggling, reality has room to reveal itself. When the mind ceases to grasp, the presence becomes known. That is why the psalmist said, "Be still and know that I am God." Not think, not analyze, not affirm, be still. For it is only in stillness that we slip out of the realm of duality and into the awareness of oneness. It is only in stillness that we cease trying to bring God into our experience and begin instead to recognize that God has always been there. Stillness is not nothingness. Stillness is not emptiness. Stillness is the fullness of God without interference. And in that fullness, fear cannot live. Let me say this again, for it is the core of our practice today. Fear is a mental disturbance. Christ is not of the mind. Therefore, only silence can reveal the Christ. When you become still, even for a moment, you step out of the world of causes and effects, out of the world of appearances, out of the world of problems, and you stand in the presence that is the answer to every problem. And in that presence, the problem dissolves of its own nothingness. This is why our practice is not one of long hours, complicated rituals, or religious effort. It is the simplest act in the world. You sit quietly for a few moments, close your eyes, and turn toward the one that is already within you. In that turning, something shifts not in the outer world, but in you. And that inner shift reveals that fear was never a power, never a presence, never anything but a belief. The human mind cannot silence fear, but the Christ within you has never known fear, and when you are still, that Christ becomes your awareness. This is the foundation upon which the 3-minute practice rests. And now, having seen why thought cannot save us, we are ready to enter into the method itself. Now we come to the practice itself, not a technique, not a formula, not a method in the human sense, but a simple opening of consciousness to the presence that has always been here. Do not make a ritual of this. Do not try to force an experience. Do not attempt to manufacture peace. You are not adding anything to yourself. You are merely removing the noise that hides what is already present. The entire practice is 3 minutes. 3 minutes of turning inward. 3 minutes that can dissolve fear. Not because the practice has power, but because the presence to which it points is the only power there is. Let us walk through it slowly. In the first minute, you close your eyes, not to shut out the world, but to relax the constant outward attention of the senses. You simply sit as you are, no effort, no strain, no expectation. And inwardly, gently, almost like a whisper rising from within, you acknowledge, I am here. You are not speaking of the human self. You are not claiming personal strength or personal wisdom. You are acknowledging the divine I that lives itself as your very being. You are recognizing the life that is always present, always active, always whole. In that soft inner statement, I am here, you turn from the appearance to the reality behind the appearance. In the second minute, allow the words to soften, to fade, and rest in a deeper awareness. Thou art here. Feel the shift. You are no longer the human trying to find God. You are the consciousness in which God is revealing himself. You are not reaching for a presence. You are recognizing the presence that has never left. And as you sit with this, something begins to flow, a peace, a warmth, a quiet certainty that cannot be explained but can be felt. You are beginning to experience the Christ of your own being. Then comes the third minute, the sacred silence. No words, no affirmations, no thoughts, just a quiet, effortless resting in being. Here you do nothing at all. Here the Father within does the work. Here you recognize yourself as the place where God shines forth. Do not try to hold the silence. Do not attempt to deepen it. Let it simply be. For in that final minute, the shift takes place not by your effort, but by grace. Fear falls away not because you have chased it out, but because you have entered a consciousness in which fear was never present. 3 minutes, just 3 minutes of turning within, and you will discover that the problem loses its urgency, the mind loses its agitation, the body relaxes, and the world loosens its hold. Something opens, something settles, something reveals itself. This, beloved, is not a technique for emergencies. It is a way of living, a continual returning to the truth of your being, a quiet recognition that I am the presence of God in expression, and therefore nothing external has power over me. In our next section, we will look at what begins to happen inside you when this simple practice becomes part of your daily life, for the transformation that follows is profound, inevitable, and deeply beautiful. And now, let us look gently and honestly at what begins to unfold within you as you take up this simple practice. For the transformation that occurs is not sudden fireworks, not dramatic visions, not the grand experiences the human mind imagines spirituality to be. No, the work of the Spirit is quieter than that, subtler than that, more intimate than that. It moves not in the noise of the world, but in the stillness of your own inner sanctuary. The first thing you will notice is this. Your relationship to fear changes. Fear may still arise for a time. Old habits of thought may still send their familiar signals, but something in you no longer believes the message. Something in you becomes aware that fear is not a command but a suggestion, and the suggestion you are free to decline. You begin to see fear rise and fall without attaching yourself to it, without becoming entangled in its story. You simply witness, and in that witnessing, fear loses its authority. Next, you will discover a great softening in your inner life, where once there was tension, there is now space. Where once there was a restless need to resolve, to fix, to understand, there is now a quiet confidence that all is well, because the presence never leaves you. The body becomes less reactive, the mind less noisy, the heart less defensive. And all of this happens not because you have mastered a technique, but because your consciousness has begun to rest in its natural state peace. Then comes something even more precious. You begin to feel guided, not by thoughts, not by logic, not by mental planning, but by an inner knowing, an intuition that rises without your effort. You will find that answers come when needed, sometimes in the silence of meditation, sometimes while washing dishes, sometimes while walking on an ordinary afternoon. The answer comes, and it carries with it a sense of rightness, a certainty that is unmistakable. This is the Christ within you, becoming active, becoming heard, becoming recognized. And then another shift occurs. You begin to see through appearances. Where previously you saw problems, now you see opportunities for recognition. Where previously you saw discord, you begin to feel harmony. Where previously you saw limitation, you begin to sense infinite possibility. Not because the outer world has changed, but because you have changed, and you are no longer looking from the human sense of self. Finally, and this is the most beautiful part of all, you will discover an atmosphere beginning to form around you. Others feel it without knowing why. They feel calmer in your presence. They feel seen. They feel safe. Not because of anything you say or do, but because you carry within yourself a consciousness that is no longer living from fear, but from the one presence. You have become a transparency for the light of God, and that light touches all who come near. This is the fruit of the 3-minute practice. It is not dramatic. It is not loud. It is not sensational. It is transformational, quietly, steadily, inevitably. You begin to live from the center and not from the circumference. You begin to act from peace rather than react from fear. You begin to discover that what you sought outside was always present within you. And now, having seen what unfolds from within, we are ready to explore how this practice functions in the moments when life seems most difficult, most uncertain, most demanding. Now let us come to one of the most important realizations you will ever make on this path. Your moments of trouble are not interruptions to your spiritual life. They are invitations to it. They are the very moments in which the presence is nearest to your recognition, the moments when the veil is thinnest, if only you will turn within rather than outward. You see, the world has taught us that when a challenge arises, whether it be a financial need, a bodily condition, a strained relationship, or an unexpected crisis, we must immediately marshal our human resources. We must plan, we must defend, we must solve, we must fight. And in doing so, we step right back into the belief of two powers, and fear rises like smoke from that belief. But for the one walking the infinite way, for the one who has learned even a little of the inner presence, trouble becomes the precise moment to pause, to breathe, and to practice the simple recognition of I am. Let me tell you something from deep experience. If you can take even 3 minutes in the very midst of the disturbance, when the bad news arrives, when the phone rings, when the report comes in, when the emotions surge, those 3 minutes will do more to transform the situation than hours of human effort. Why? Because the moment you turn within, the moment you release your grasp on the world's appearance and rest in the quiet acknowledgement of God's presence, a shift takes place not in the outer condition, but in you. And when you change, the condition cannot remain as it was. The condition is only an appearance projected from consciousness, and when consciousness rises, the appearance must eventually align with that higher awareness. So I say to you, when fear strikes, practice. When the mind races, practice. When pressure builds, practice. Not to fix the situation, but to realize that there is no situation outside of omnipresence. Let us consider a few examples. Suppose you receive a troubling financial notice. Before the mind has time to rush into panic, sit quietly for 3 minutes. Close the outer world. Turn your attention inward and whisper, I am here. Not the frightened self, but the presence. Then, thou art here. And finally, silence. You will discover perhaps for the first time that the fear was not in the notice. The fear was in the belief that supply lay outside of God. And when that belief dissolves in omnipresence, the outward condition finds its rightful expression. Or suppose you face a health concern, a pain in the body, a diagnosis that seems heavy. The natural impulse is to think, to worry, to consult, to search. But before you do anything, take those 3 minutes. You are not trying to change the body. You are recognizing that you are not the body, you are the life that animates it, the infinite idea of God that cannot be touched by disease. And in that recognition, fear leaves. And when fear leaves, the body begins to assume the harmony of the consciousness that governs it. Or suppose someone speaks harshly to you, attacks you, misunderstands you. The old self would defend, argue, correct. But you, having learned this practice, turn within. For 3 minutes you rest in the presence. And when you rise from that silence, you will find that resentment cannot hold you, hurt cannot wound you, and you may even discover that the necessary words, if any are needed, flow effortlessly from a consciousness of peace. Beloved, hear this well. There is no crisis that is improved by fear. There is no situation that is healed by panic. There is no circumstance that is strengthened by human effort. But every crisis, every situation, every circumstance is transformed the moment you return to the truth of your being. This practice is not an escape from life. It is the way of bringing God into visible expression in life. It is the way the invisible presence becomes the tangible peace, the harmony, the order, the supply of your experience. And now, having seen how we meet trouble with inner stillness, we move next to the unfolding transformation that occurs when the practice begins to live you, when the Christ becomes the governing center of your consciousness. And now, as we come further along this path, something very beautiful begins to happen, something you cannot force, something you cannot manufacture, something you cannot even anticipate with the human mind. It is the quiet unfoldment of the inner life. It is the dawning of the realization that the practice is no longer something you do, it is something that begins to live you. At first, you take the 3 minutes deliberately, consciously, perhaps out of discipline. You practice because you feel disturbed, or because you want peace, or because you remember that fear is never the answer. And so you sit, you turn within, you rest in the presence. But as the weeks pass, as your awareness deepens, you notice something. The impulse to turn within arises spontaneously. The call to silence comes from within itself. You do not practice to reach God, you find yourself practicing because God is reaching you. This is the first sign of unfoldment. You no longer meditate to escape fear, you meditate because you have tasted truth. Next, you will discover a remarkable shift in how you experience your own identity. Where once you believed yourself to be a person moving through a world of forces and conditions, now you begin to sense that you are the center of awareness through which the world is seen. You are no longer the actor struggling in the drama, you are the light that illumines it. Problems may still appear, but they appear on the screen of consciousness, not in the self that watches the screen. And because they are seen from the inner Christ, they lose their power to bind or frighten. This is the second sign of unfoldment. You no longer live from the circumference. You begin to live from the center. Then, without your effort, your actions begin to change. Your speech becomes softer, clearer, freer. Your decisions carry a natural wisdom, a sense of rightness. Your interactions reflect patience, compassion, and an unhurried calm, not because you are trying to be spiritual, but because the Christ in you is gradually taking the reins. You find yourself listening more and reacting less. You find yourself sensing more deeply and assuming less quickly. You find yourself flowing with life rather than pushing against it. This is the third sign of unfoldment. The Christ begins to act as your awareness. Then, something more subtle occurs. You begin to notice that you carry a presence, an atmosphere wherever you go. Others feel it without knowing why. In the office, in the home, in the marketplace, people respond differently. They feel safe with you. They feel peace around you. They sense something in your presence that quiets them, something gentle, something strong. And this something is not personal charm, not personality, not influence. It is the radiation of the inner light you have touched in your silence. This is the fourth sign of unfoldment. You become a transparency for God. And finally, you come to a moment, perhaps quietly, perhaps unexpectedly, when you see that the eye that has been practicing, the eye that has been seeking peace, the eye that has been turning within, is not the real eye at all. You realize that the one who has been meditating is the same one who is being revealed in meditation. The doer and the presence merge into a single awareness, the Christ of your own being. This is the fifth and highest sign of unfoldment. You stop living as a seeker and begin living as the self. Not the personal self, but the divine self that has always been the reality of your being. Beloved, when this unfoldment begins, your life is no longer lived by human effort. It becomes an expression of grace. The world may remain the same, but you are not the same, and because you are not the same, your world cannot remain unchanged. And with this understanding, we are now ready to enter the final section of our journey where the practice resolves into the peace that nothing in this world can disturb. And now, as we bring this time of sharing to its quiet close, let us return once more to the very heart of the message, the truth that has been with us from the beginning. You are not trying to reach God. You are not trying to draw something holy into your experience. You are merely uncovering the presence that has never left you. The 3-minute practice, the turning within, the stillness, the recognition of I am, all of this is simply the way we remember what has always been true. We do not create God's presence, we reveal it. We do not invite God into our lives. We awaken to the God that lives as our life. And when this is seen even dimly, even for a moment, you discover a peace that the world cannot give. because it is not of the world. It is not dependent on circumstances, on conditions, on people, or on events. This peace is the fruit of knowing one presence, one power, one life, and recognizing that that one is the very essence of your being. This peace is not an emotion. It is not a fleeting upliftment. It is a shift of identity. It is the recognition that the I you have called yourself is the eternal, indestructible, ever-present activity of God. And when you know this, even in the smallest measure, fear has no root in you anymore, because fear has no root in God. So, as we end, let us rest in this simple truth. Nothing can ever separate you from the presence within. Nothing can ever take from you the peace that arises from your own being. Nothing external has authority over the Christ that you are. Carry this awareness with you. Practice often not from effort, but from joy. Return to stillness whenever it calls you, for in that stillness the miracle takes place. The shadows dissolve, the mind quiets, the heart opens, and you remember that I am. Beloved, go in this peace, not your peace, but the peace of God that lives as your very self. Let it surround you, guide you, uphold you, and as you move through the world, know that every person you touch, every situation you meet, every moment you enter is met by the light of the presence shining through you. Be still often. Recognize the I am, and let the peace that follows be your gift to the world.